Hello, everybody, ladies and gentlemen. With us, we have today Erica Dansereau. So, everybody give her a round of applause. All of my friends are watching. All of your friends are watching. People we don't know are watching. It's going to be a good time. So, before we get into your writing, tell me a little bit about yourself so our audience knows everything about you.
Okay, well, let's see. My bank account number is just kidding. Let's see.
No, don't
Uh,
stop.
do you want my social security as well?
Mother's maiden name.
Mother's maiden name, yeah. Any of my street I grew up on, maybe.
Your first
No,
pet.
was
Oh, your first pet.
oh yeah, my first pet. Yeah, no. So I am a married, stay-at-home, homeschooling mom of two. And born and raised in Idaho. That's where I still live. And obviously, I'm an author, I'm an avid reader, and yeah.
Okay, awesome. So I was looking at your bio on Amazon, and I won't
hmm
ruin it for everybody, but at the end it says you like to have a cup of tea or coffee and to settle down with a good book, obviously. So tell me about some of the stuff that you like
hmm
to read that maybe has influenced your writing a little bit.
Yeah, so I mean, one of my all time favorite books is called Peace Like a River by Leaf Enger. And that book I just think is just so beautiful. And I feel like he really has influenced my writing a lot. I've been a lifelong reader, so like growing up, some of my favorite books were like the Chronicle of Narnia series by C.S.
Mhm.
Lewis. Um, those ones definitely influenced me to be a writer at all. Um, and yeah, The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath. Basically anything by F. Scott Fitzgerald. Um, a few other writers I feel like that influenced my book specifically were, I would say, William Kent Kruger, who wrote Ordinary Grace and This Tender Land. He also has like a whole mystery series that I've never read, so I can't really speak to those books.
Mhm.
um, but let's see, who else? I don't know. I feel like those are kind of like the big main ones.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
Well, how have they influenced you then? Because I mean, you gave a pretty wide array of genres for
hmm
those books that you like to read, and I think yours is specifically more historical fiction. Is that what you wrote?
Yeah, I mean, it's technically historical fiction. It kind of falls into a couple different genres, honestly. Historical fiction, Christian fiction, inspirational fiction, romance, even. Um, but like, as far as how books influence my writing and like other authors influence my writing, when I'm reading a book that has absolutely gripped me, whether that's just based on the plot alone or based on just the writing style and how they string words together. Um, I kind of always am reading it through the writer's perspective and thinking, how did they do this? Like, and wanting to dig in and find like, their method and the way that they got from point A to all the way to Z, start to
Mhm.
finish. And with like my favorite authors and stuff, that's kind of one of the things that I've always thought about was like, how are they making me feel what I feel right now? And like just having this sense of awe about why, how they wrote what they did, why they wrote it, and what they're trying to get across to the reader. And I feel like all of those authors, like the ones that I just named, did a really phenomenal job in all of those senses. And so taking it from like a writer's perspective and just being able to like go back and like read all my favorite books and think, how did they do this? And why is this a book that stuck with me? Like, why are these books that are my favorites that have, lasted some since my childhood or, into adulthood? Like, why are these my favorite books? What did this author do? And how do I recreate that and like use
Mhm.
that in my own writing? And so it kind
Awesome.
of is just dissecting, what they did and trying to kind of create my own branch from that.
Yeah. Well, and that's a good point. Like, we want to emulate our favorite authors and write what they wrote in a sense because that's what engages us. And so it's always good to have
Hmm.
that in your mind and think about that, but then also put your own unique twist on it to give it
Exactly.
your own flavor. So I really like that.
Hmm.
And so your book, Come Forth as Gold,
Hmm.
that's the title, right?
It is, yeah.
Okay, good. Glad I didn't get that wrong. I definitely think that there's some themes that you've probably interwoven in there that I want to get to a little bit later. But let's talk about first your style. So maybe what's the style that you wanted to emulate in your book that maybe you picked up from some other authors, and what kind of fresh flavors did you throw in there yourself? What's your writing like?
I would say my writing, as far as, come forth as gold goes, at least, um, there's a gentleness to it that could be found in books like Peace Like a River or Ordinary Grace. Like, it's a coming of age story, and it has faith interwoven into the whole entire thing. And those books, had that aspect as well. And so, my writing is filled with aspects of the Christian faith because that's super important to me. It's gentle, it's not preachy, um, and I would say it's really thoughtful. Like, at least I hope it's very thoughtful and
Hmm.
thought provoking.
Hmm. Okay. So going on to the themes a little bit then, I'm going
Hmm.
to read here from the back of the book, or I guess it's not the back, technically on Amazon, it's just a little blurb there.
Yeah.
But we'll get a little bit deep here. It says, why does a sovereign God permit tragedy to happen? So let's dissect that for a second here. And, maybe without
Hmm.
giving too many spoilers of your book, unless you want to, of course. What message did you want the readers to take away from that particular question?
Of why does a sovereign God permit tragedy to happen?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, you have to read the book to find out. um, I mean, I think that most everyone has probably gone through something in their life where they can cry out to God and say, why? Why did you let this happen? Like, this is such a horrible, tragic thing. If you're so in control and you love me, why did you let this happen?
Hmm.
And so I think that it's kind of something that everyone can relate to in some form. Hopefully, maybe some people can't. And hey,
Hmm.
that's great. Good for you. Um, but I think a lot of people can relate to it. And my big thing that, like, I want to inspire readers to know is that God, he loves us, and he truly is sovereign. He truly is in control. And sometimes there are things that we don't understand. We're not supposed to lean on our own understanding. There's things that um, happen for either a reason or just as a result of just being in a fallen, broken world. But no matter what, God is using that for the greater good, and that he can bring beauty out of any source of pain.
Right.
And just hoping that I can, inspire readers to seek God and to trust in him, even when he doesn't seem like he's trustworthy. He still is. He's still good, and he still has promises, and he still loves us.
Hmm. Wise words. The second part to dissect is the sinner worthy of forgiveness? So that's another thing I'm sure a lot of people have on their hearts as they go about their lives and probably do less than savory things sometimes. So
Mm-hmm.
how are you telling the readers through the book that perhaps they are worthy of forgiveness?
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, with my book having a strong Christian theme, I bring in the whole concept of how we have all been forgiven by Christ, and we all have that. Um, and to be able to extend that to someone else and to show that love and to show that, like, I mean, that takes a lot of love to be able to forgive someone else for something that they did to you.
Hmm.
Um, and so, yeah, forgiveness is a really, really strong theme in the book. I want to be careful about saying too much just because it can give away a bit
Hmm.
of the plot. Yeah.
No, that's fine. That's fine. Would you say that you direct your book to an audience of Christians or non-Christians? What was your intent with that?
Man, this is a hard question because I didn't intend to write a Christian fiction novel. When I originally wrote this, it was not Christian fiction. It was going to have, good basic message, of hope and love. But in the midst of writing this was kind of when I kind of went through this renewal of my faith, I guess you could say. And I had a renewed passion for just the gospel, and I feel like God really like turned my writing into writing a book that has strong Christian themes, even though that's not what I set out to do. So I think that it's a book that definitely appeals to the Christian audience, but I've had so many non-Christians read it as well and tell me that they absolutely thoroughly enjoyed it, that they were really grateful for it, that it gave them a lot to think about, that it was really inspiring. And so, I mean, I know that it can be enjoyed by, a secular audience and a Christian audience. But I market it as Christian or inspirational fiction simply because I don't want anyone to be thrown off and think that like, oh, this is a book, that doesn't have certain elements in it, and then be like surprised and feel maybe betrayed by the author or something like that. Mm-hmm. So it is marketed as like a Christian or inspirational fiction novel.
Okay. And you bring up an interesting point about how when you're writing, maybe your goal or your trajectory changes from the beginning. I've had that happen a lot in some of the things that I've written. So you ended up where you are, but what was the original inspiration for you to start writing this book? What were some of the maybe events in your own life or historical events that you drew from?
Yeah, so this book takes place in a town called Goldfield, Nevada, and it's a tiny little, used to be a mining town, kind of in the middle of nowhere, and that's where my granddad actually grew up. And he was born in the later 30s. He grew up there. And a lot of what happens in this book is kind of based off of things that he went through in his childhood. And the plot, the characters, everything is totally fictionalized. But the town itself, or I should say most of the town itself is, accurate. And so it's things that he went through as a kid, having this really unique childhood, being in this small town, and then having to be like bused to and from school in another town because their school was falling apart, and just like different things that happened. So it stemmed from being kind of inspired by my granddad's hometown, because growing up I'd heard like different snippets of stories and stuff that he'd told, and because the town has very interesting and colorful like history when you look into it. And so I was always kind of like curious about this place, but he died when I was fairly young. I was 7.5 when he passed from cancer. And I always thought that town was really interesting. We like passed through it once when I was, we were driving down to Vegas, like when I was a kid, and my dad would tell stories about like going and visiting his grandparents there. And it was just always so interesting. And there's a lot of like ghost stories and different stuff, attached to the town. And so it was always kind of fascinating to me. So I always had it kind of tucked in the back of my mind, like, oh, I want to like maybe write a story about that one day. Cause I've been kind of writing since I was a little kid. And, I came up with this story, and I just like this tiny little nugget of an idea. And I decided, hey, I can set it in Goldfield. And when I started really thinking about the town and thinking about my family's history there, I was like ruminating on a tragic event that happened to my granddad's family in these two little towns that the story takes place. And I can't really mention exactly what, because a fictionalized version of it happens in my book, and it's a major catalyst for the rest of the story, so I can't really give away too much. But yeah, that's where it all kind of stemmed from, and it was just directly inspired by my granddad. And it was pretty fun because in my like research of the town and everything, because obviously he's not here anymore for me to like ask all these questions to and pick his brain, I was able to be put in touch with some of his classmates and childhood friends that he grew up with in this tiny little town. And they shared with me like obviously information about like their childhoods, but also like memories of my granddad that like no one would have ever known, and pictures of him as a kid, you know, like all their friends and stuff together. And so it was kind of like this fun family history project in the middle of like also being like, you know, a book. Um, so yeah, it's a really cool story. Kind of fun how everything like came together and stuff for it.
Yeah, that's cool to kind of get not sidetracked from your main project, but to get maybe this extra bit of, I don't know, an extra little present while you're doing your research. So that's cool.
Yeah.
And again, without doing too many spoilers, because I can tell you're hesitant for those, does your book have any sort of what might be considered divine intervention or anything like that, or is it strictly a story about people and maybe their own personal growth?
Mostly that. People in their own personal growth. It's a coming of age story, also a coming to Christ story. Um, but yeah, there's no divine intervention, you know, like big moments like that necessarily. But yeah,
And so, remind me the name of the town again.
Goldfield, Nevada,
Okay,
and
and so
then
I'm assuming that's where the title came from. Come forth as gold. So
yeah.
where'd you get the rest of the inspiration for the title from?
So the title is directly taken from a passage in the Bible, from Job 23:10. But he knoweth the way that I take. When he hath tried me, I shall come forth as gold. So that's like where that comes from, and obviously it ties into the town's name and a direct theme of the book. You know.
Okay, awesome. So knowing the story of Job, then I can assume that your characters are going through great trials and tribulations as well.
Yeah.
Okay, got it. Again, no spoilers, please.
Yeah.
In case I. So what makes your book unique as far as either plot or writing compared to maybe some other books that might be in the same genre by other authors?
I mean, part of I think what makes it unique is just like the family history aspect that's attached to it for me.
Hmm.
Um, you know, I don't know really of any other books that are set in Goldfield or Tonopah. That's the other town that's nearby that the book takes place in as well. But just the my family history that, you know, directly ties into the book, and kind of the traumatic event that my family, my ancestors and stuff all went through, which again, can't say what it is. Sorry. But I think that that makes it really unique. And then obviously like my own like faith and stuff is woven into the mix as well. So while, yeah, you know, it's written in the vein of Peace Like a River or Ordinary Grace, like it also has its own twist, and it also stems from something very personal to me. So
Yeah. Well, and that's one thing that's cool about being an author is you get to take something that's very personal to you and share it with everyone else. And it's very a vulnerable, excuse me, a very vulnerable experience to do that, but also at the same time freeing if people will almost accept what you're putting out there and say, okay, you know, hey, you have all these vulnerable things that you're sharing with us, but we still love the book, and maybe we like you more as a person now for sharing those things. So that's always something that's cool. Tell me about your writing habits. What's it like to put in a bunch of work to finish a novel? I think it was 300 and some odd pages.
yeah, like 312 pages or something like that. I think total it was like 86,000 words, somewhere in there.
Okay.
I mean, right now, my daily writing habits,
All
I
over.
don't really have like a routine. You know, my day to day is kind of all over the place with two little kids and homeschooling them and just, you know. Um, but yeah, writing a novel and publishing a novel takes a lot of work and a lot of dedication and commitment. And I know that I wouldn't have been able to finish this if it weren't for my husband, Pat, you know, like taking care of the kids and giving me time to just like shut the door or go to a coffee shop or whatever and just sit down and write. Um, you know, these days it's kind of, everything's kind of a little bit all over the place. So I don't really have like a daily routine, but I try every day to do something writing related. And sometimes I'm able to just sit down at my computer and work for, you know, a couple of hours and churn out a couple of thousand words. And other days it's 10 minutes and, you know, maybe one sentence.
Think of
So
a plot point for later on. You know.
Yeah, exactly.
So you mentioned publishing a little bit. Are you traditionally
hmm
published or self-published?
I am self-published. Um, so I thought that I used to think that being traditionally published was the only way. I was pretty like dead set on that, but I kind of in time came to realize that that was only because I really needed validation, like for someone else to say, you're good enough to do this. And yes, I think you're a good writer, that like stamp of approval. And when I realized like, I really don't need that. Like that's the only reason I want to be traditionally published. And I really don't need that anymore. Like I'm really like confident in my worth and my work and everything. I started looking to self-publishing more. And I thought that it was so intriguing. And I had a couple of phone calls with this girl who's a writing coach, and she helped me like just kind of talk through the process with me. And I realized that yeah, hey, self-publishing is great. Like that's what I want to do because I want to have full control over my work. And I've heard like different horror stories of authors who have been traditionally published, and there's certain aspects that they don't have control over anymore, and because they've signed some contract with a publishing house, and you know they're not really happy about it, and I want to know that I have full control over my work and every aspect of it. So I decided to self-publish, but then looking into it more, there's a lot of upfront financial costs and big learning curve because I'd never done it before, and I didn't think that I didn't think I could do it after all. I thought, okay, I'm going to have to just start querying literary agents and go the traditional publishing route. But then it was pretty cool because I met someone online through Instagram, through like a Bookstagram account, and she ended up moving to, excuse me, the Boise area, which is where I am at, and uh, we had struck up a good friendship, and I had sent her my book to kind of like beta read for me. And she's like, let's meet up at a coffee shop. Like, I want to talk to you about this. And she said, I hope you don't mind, but I also designed a cover for you because I do that.
Are we back? Maybe we're back. Let's see.
Maybe we're
I don't
back.
remember what I even asked at the time. We had a medical emergency, a coughing fit that I just edited out for you guys. If you want to see all of that, just email me and I'll send you all the edited footage.
Please don't. Please don't.
So I think we left off with you meeting your friend in a coffee shop and she just made a cover for you.
Yeah. So she's like, I hope you don't mind, but like the entire time I was reading your book, I just kept envisioning this cover and I just had to make it. And I'm kind of blown away. And I had tried to design my own cover just like for fun, and it was super terrible. And so I kind of expected hers to be kind of terrible. And then she like shows me, and I'm like absolutely blown away because it's stunning and it's beautiful. And she asked me, "What are your publishing plans?" And I told her, I was like, "Well, I kind of feel like I just have to traditionally publish, like." And she's like, "Are you kidding me? Like, do you want to self-publish?" I'm like, "Well, yeah, that's what I would rather do." And she's like, "I can help you. Like, I know how to do all this. Like, I can walk you through everything." Like, and so she kind of just took me under her wing, and we just like, it was like really crazy how it happened because it was the end of February when I met her for this coffee shop date, and my book was published by mid-April. And so
Oh,
it was
wow.
crazy fast, and it all worked out beautifully. I'm super happy with it. And so, yeah, so I'm self-published, and I kind of intend to continue down the self-publishing route, at least for the foreseeable future.
It's crazy when you tell me how fast that was because I was talking to some other people recently and they're telling me like even if you get a publishing house that like signs a deal with you, it'll still take like 2 years or something like that, even after that point. And I'm like, gosh, that is just
Mm-hmm.
a crazy amount of time and I'm impatient and I just want to get it out there and that's that's a
Yeah,
crazy journey that you have. And I also do want to
yeah.
point out, I think it's very refreshing to hear you talk about the validation perhaps of of a traditional publisher versus do I actually need that validation? That's something that's been going through my head recently. I've been querying agents and it's a pain in the butt. And they're like, yeah, we'll get back to you in 18 months. And if you don't hear back from us, then we said we passed. And it's like, well, that's not useful. Like, and then they
Yeah.
don't give you any feedback as to why they passed maybe. And so maybe I'll go the impatient route and just self-publish. We'll see. We'll see when I get there.
I mean, go where you feel led. But yeah, I've written a couple other books and I tried to get them traditionally published. And thank goodness they were never picked up, because now I look at them and I'm like, oh, they're so terrible, and I'm going to be so embarrassed. But I went through the whole querying agents and waiting months and months, and it's like a really defeating game. I at least for me it was. And when I finally was like meeting with my friend and I decided that, you know what, I can do this. I can self-publish. I can take control of my career. Like, it was a really freeing feeling. And just to know that, like, I can do this on my own time. I can do this when I want. I have full control over every aspect of it. You know, I know what's going to be in that. Like, I can control every part of the situation. And to me, I don't know, I'm just too much of a control freak, it sounds like. But but it was really liberating when I finally realized that, like, hey, I can do this on my own.
So what would you say is one of the biggest lessons that you've learned through self-publishing then?
Ooh, one of the biggest lessons. Well, don't push the button that says publish until you're actually ready to publish. I learned that the hard way. I published my book like a month early on accident and had to like take it down and do this whole thing. But as that aside, honestly, I think it just comes down to trusting myself and trusting God, because like I didn't think that I could do it, and I was looking at all these roadblocks that were in my way, and just realizing, you know, and again, like sometimes for some people, being traditionally published is the right thing for them, you know, but like for me, it wasn't, and I tried to still go down that path and kind of ignore the thing that God had put on my heart and the way that he wanted me to go with my writing career. And obviously he worked it all out and everything, but I kind of ignored him at first. You know, I thought, I can't do this. Like, it's just going to be too hard. It's too impossible. And again, he, you know, showed up and said, no, it's not impossible. Like, look, this is what I wanted you to do. And here you are. Like, let's do it. So it's just a good reminder for me to just like, you know, if God's put something on my heart and prompted me to do something, to trust him that like, no, he actually really will provide a way. And so I don't know if that's really the answer you were looking for, but
That's
just
fine.
like, yeah.
You're just taking up time on the podcast. Just need to make sure we hit 30 minutes. No, I'm just kidding. Okay, well, you know, it is awesome to hear your whole perspective on that. And I've heard positives and negatives about self-publishing and traditional publishing and hybrid publishing, and it's just the whole industry could use a revamp, it sounds like. But I do like how you keep saying my career. So it sounds like you have plans to continue to write and to write more novels. Tell me a little bit about what's coming.
Yeah. So, my current project, it's definitely different than Come Forth as Gold. It still falls under the genre of inspirational fiction, but it's going quite a different route. It's contemporary. There's some sci-fi in there, a lot of adventure. It's going to be quite different. It's actually the first of a series that I'm starting. So I'm still in the drafting stages of that, and we'll see kind of when it's done. If I can publish it by summer, that would be an absolute answer to prayer, but like, I don't know if that's going to
If you
happen or
need a
not.
beta reader, let me know. I'm always down for some sci-fi. And
Yeah,
inspiration
for
as well,
sure.
of course. I like feeling good, so that's nice.
Okay.
Any final comments before I let you go?
Um, Not really off the top of my head right now.
Did you want to read an excerpt? I don't remember what
Uh,
you put on the questionnaire.
do you want me to? I'm more than
I
happy to
mean,
if
if
you
you
want me
want to, I'm not going to force you to read,
to.
but
Sure. Sure, I can. Let's see here. I'll read something that doesn't give away too much. Let's see. Okay. I swallowed and stared at her, unblinking. Open your eyes, Kitty, and get off this dark, sad train before you crash, burn, and enjoy it. Are you kidding me? Enjoy it? You think I enjoy feeling this way? You think this feels good to me? If you don't like it, then why are you so insistent upon continuing down that road and putting up with it? You say you're suffocating. Maybe other people put the pillow over your face, but you're the one holding it there. Her eyes went wide. After a handful of seconds, she whispered, "You're cruel, mean and cruel. If you think that's mean, then you're not going to like what I have to say next." I took a deep breath. I love you. I've loved you for a long time, and it's going to take forever for me to stop loving you. But you know what I wish? I wish I didn't love you. I wish you loved yourself instead. She looked at me like she hated me. In a way, I hated myself too for making her cry. But I think what we both hated the most was the truth. She spun and broke into a sprint, her feet kicking up dust behind her as she went. I watched her go with hopes that maybe she'd find herself along the way, wherever it was she was heading. I'll stop there.
All right. Well, everybody, Erica Dansereau, and thank you very much.
Thank you.